So, today we're talking about fetishes, which I think should be a fun topic.
Well, we should probably explain why our title is Fun with Feet. Is your kink normal?
Take it away.
I have a bone to pick with Twitch here. Why is the word fetish not allowed? I mean, there's probably a reason, but we are here to educate people and help them understand their own sexuality, better understand the meaning behind these terms. And we weren't allowed to use the word fetish, not even like a clever way of disguising, like, change the E to the number 3, put an asterisk there. It knew all the variations of somebody trying to spell out the word fetish and would not allow us to put that in our title. So
I know. I worry once they find out kink and how we're using it, right? Because you could say kink in the neck, and maybe they're like, "Oh, it's innocent."
How to find a chiropractor who will help you?
Once they find out it's sexual, I'm worried they'll be like, "Nope, not good. Goodbye."
I know. We're probably gonna. I don't know what happens. Do we get banned? Do we get flagged?
No. Well, I know on all of our videos, it's like inappropriate content or whatever in the top corner. I don't know if you've seen that.
I think it's sexual material or something like that, right?
Something.
Hopefully it doesn't say inappropriate content. These girls are inappropriate. I don't care what they're trying to sell you here. They're inappropriate.
Oh my God.
Anyway.
And you know what? I see so much sexually explicit content on Twitch. If you're just browsing, seeing what people are chatting about, there's a lot of sexually explicit material. I'm not saying that's bad, but how come, that's okay. We can't educate about fetishes.
Right. It's not just you click on our live stream and it's just a close-up of our butts in yoga pants or something. You know what I mean? That's okay. But the word fetish in a sex education title,
right?
We draw the line. Not that there's anything wrong with butts and yoga pants.
No, definitely not. You do you. It's just, can we also educate at the same time? That'd be cool.
Yeah. So let's make space for everyone here.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we'll give it a shot, and hopefully Twitch allows us to keep this up.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
So, since we have, kink in the title, and we're talking about fetishes today, we should talk about the difference between the two. So, kink is an umbrella term of anything that is out of the norm sexually. Sexual desire, activity, that kind of thing. Anything that's out of the norm, which is really gray, right? Because we talk about what is norm, what is normal. So it's out of the gray. And that's changed over time, right? A while ago, it was considered homosexuality was
considered a kink.
Yeah, it was considered, a disorder.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, that too.
So abnormal, right? So we've come a long way in that, which is great. So I'm curious, what some things we might find is a kink or kinky or a fetish now, how that will change over time. There's a lot of kinks and fetishes that are becoming more and more popular. And so at what point is it just normal?
That's a good point. What we consider to be a kink throughout history has evolved and changed. And what we consider common or normal, appropriate sexual behavior has also evolved.
Yeah. I mean, oral sex and anal sex were both considered kinks, both considered out of the norm. And I think that we consider oral sex, at least, maybe anal sex too, as being very, very common and just kind of routine and part of sexual activity.
Yeah, it's those are common terms. People know what you're referring to. They're common sexual acts that people are practicing.
Yeah, I don't think people blink an eye when we talk about fellatio, which is blowjobs, right? I don't think people blink an eye at that when we talk about that anymore. It's oh yeah, that's totally normal and common.
Well, I mean, there was a time where showing your ankles in history was risque. So I mean, there's just leaps and bounds. They've really come.
Right. So, kinks is just the umbrella term, and then fetishes are underneath that. So all fetishes are kinks, but not all kinks are fetishes.
Okay. No, I'm following. Okay, a fetish is a kink, but not all kinks are fetishes. So do you have examples of a fetish that is obviously a kink, but then a kink that does not qualify as a fetish.
Yes, for sure. So a fetish is something, a desire, a fantasy, an activity that you need in order to achieve arousal or orgasm, ejaculation. So what you need for sexual satisfaction and gratification. Without that, it's very difficult or impossible to achieve.
Okay.
And then a kink is something that like you enjoy, and is out of the norm, but not necessarily needed.
Okay.
Right. So a kink, it could be like, maybe you like getting your hair pulled, right? But you don't need it to achieve sexual gratification.
Okay.
It's just something that might be considered outside of the norm. Not everyone likes to get their hair pulled. But a fetish is something that you might need, right? And so there's a lot of different fetishes that we'll talk about, and we can go through examples. But one in particular that we're going to talk about, which is part of our title, is some people need some aspect of feet to achieve sexual gratification, and without that, they don't.
Okay, so could you consider feet to be a kink? Meaning you enjoy feet, you find that fun, but it's not required for you to have arousal. So some people often probably use the term fetish incorrectly then, right?
For sure, for sure. And I think kink and fetish get mixed up a lot. And I think that there's confusion on whether or not like an activity can be a fetish. Because even like clinically in our DSM, when we talk about a fetishistic disorder, that's on non-living objects or non-genitalia body parts, such as feet. It doesn't say anything about an activity, such as like the process of being tied up or something like that, right? So when I think of activities, I think of kink, but I guess you could probably call it a fetish if you need that activity to achieve sexual gratification.
Okay, so we're mostly talking about non-living objects. And in terms of the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which is where we get information on how to diagnose somebody if they meet criteria, right? So if you're diagnosed with a fetishistic disorder, you would have to have sexual interest in a non-living object or non-genital body part.
Yep, for over 6 months.
For over 6 months.
It would have to create distress. You don't like it. It's causing you anxiety. It's causing you depression. It's impacting your functioning negatively. So maybe it's impacting your ability to go to work or, maintain, relationships and friendships, that kind of thing. That's when it might start to cross the line into a disorder, right? Fetishes, like having fetishes, there's no shame around that. Like if it is not negatively impacting your life and you don't feel distress about it, you enjoy it, and it's not harming anyone, like non-consenting persons, great, beautiful.
Okay. So that's fascinating because I did not realize that there was a difference between what meets criteria for a fetishistic disorder and what the definition of a fetish is, because it sounds like there's a pretty big difference there. If we're talking about a fetish, it's a requirement to have sexual arousal, but you don't
or completion or like an orgasm or ejaculation.
Okay, but if you are seeking treatment from a therapist, a sex therapist, and trying to determine if you're looking for help with your fetish, you would only meet fetishistic disorder if that fetish, which might not be required for your sexual arousal, but you feel some distress around that, or it is impairing your ability to function or harming relationships in some way.
Yeah.
For at least 6 months.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep. So if you have a fetish, just having a fetish doesn't mean it's a problem. Doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean you need to see a sex therapist. But if it's causing you distress, or again, it's maybe being engaged with non-consenting parties, then that's when we would be concerned. For sure.
Great. Thank you for clarifying.
Of course. And a fetish too can be just fantasy. So if you cannot achieve arousal or, an orgasm without thinking of something, such as thinking about feet, having a fantasy about feet, that's also considered.
There's no shame. It's just I'm picturing
thinking about feet.
Thinking about feet and being like, that's what I need. I got to visualize feet. Again, no shame in that. Just a funny thought for me as an individual.
Right. Right. So fantasy counts. Mm-hmm. So even if you're thinking like, I've just thought about it, never engaged in it, it can still be considered a fetish if that's what you absolutely need.
Oh, this is really fascinating. I love this topic.
I love it too. I think it's really fascinating too. And I think there can be a lot of shame around fetishes. So just the word, I think, is still like, we're coming around to it of like, is that a bad thing? Like, I feel like there's still some negative connotation with it.
I think you're right about that. And I have often reflected on that because there have been individuals who have sought therapy around help with a fetish, and sometimes there's really nothing wrong with the particular fetish that they have. They just feel so much distress about having a fetish, just the fact that they have a fetish, and they don't want to have this fetish, even if it is not, impacting their relationships or impairing their ability to function in some way. They just don't want to have one. And the work is really about learning to accept and be okay with this part of themselves and their sexuality and their sexual arousal. Which to me, that's like a shift in your belief system and what feels like appropriate versus inappropriate. And I will say that oftentimes there's some religious trauma involved in that.
Very true.
People that feel, their fetishes goes against a religious belief that they have.
Very true. And like, how often do we see fetishes normalized in media? Right? Like, thinking about the difference between kink and fetishes, like, I feel like the most that we've had recently is BDSM, which is bondage and discipline, dominance and submission, and sadism and masochism, which I'll explain in a second. That BDSM has been more in the media with like 50 Shades of Grey, that series, that book series that turned into a movie series. That's coming out more, but I haven't heard really anything in the media about fetishes. I don't think there's any media around that normalizes it in any sort of way.
Normalizing it. I'm thinking about the show like My Strange Addiction. I feel like they kind of like bring fetishes into that at times. Somebody who marries, like, wants to marry their car or, something to that effect, and they kind of make it this like super bizarre, weird, strange, can you believe it kind of message around, those types of fetishes.
Right. Exactly. And so just since I said I would explain it, sadism and masochism, for those of you who do or do not know, sadism is like achieving sexual gratification through inflicting pain or humiliation on someone else. That's consenting, If they're not consenting, that would be considered a disorder. And then masochism is sexual gratification through receiving pain or humiliation.
What's the disorder if you are inflicting pain on somebody that is not consenting?
So that is sexual sadism disorder. So that's, again, over a period of 6 months, and that's if you're inflicting pain on someone that's non-consenting, or, again, maybe they are consenting, but you're experiencing extreme distress around it, but you need it for arousal or gratification, or it's impacting your functioning of some kind.
It's a disorder. Also sounds like likely a crime.
If they're non-consenting, yeah. Absolutely. And then masochism can also be a disorder, sexual masochistic disorder, I believe. For same thing, like 6 months, it's causing you distress, but you need it for arousal or gratification, and it's impacting functioning.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're not seeing a lot of that in the media. So I think that is also creating shame around this as well.
And it's I think we should really drive home what makes something clinically a disorder and what is something that is completely fine for you, right? And so the biggest question to ask yourself, if you're somebody who's watching, who is not sure if their fetish, kink is normal, does your fetish behavior cause you distress, impair your ability to function in some way, or is harming your relationships, like disrupting your life in some way, right? I think that would be probably be the most important question to ask yourself. Yeah. If those are not variables happening for you, then you're okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I think maybe the only thing, I guess, to clarify too, it could be an issue if you're not experiencing distress about it, but it is impacting functioning because you're engaging with a non-consenting person, right?
Yep, good point.
If you're doing this with an unconsenting, non-consenting person and you feel okay about it, that's still not okay.
I think let's just like broaden the whole thing. Any sexual behavior, we shouldn't even be laughing about this. Any sexual behavior with anybody who is not consenting, not okay. Not, definitely seek help. That is behavior that is really damaging and fetish or not. You could be fetish free.
And we're laughing because we were trying to be concise about it. Like, here is your concise answer. And then we're like, but wait, there's more.
There's more.
Okay. So I think if you have a fetish, you're probably asking yourself, why? Right? Mm-hmm. Why do I have a fetish? Some people don't have a fetish. What causes someone to have a fetish? And overall, there's different theories. There is no 100%, this is exactly why you have a fetish. There's just different theories. And one of the most common theories is conditioning. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if people have heard of Pavlov's dogs. A lot of people in the general population have heard about it. If you're in the field, you've heard about it. There was a gentleman, Pavlov, who he paired the sound of a bell with food or meat powder with dogs. So every time he rang a bell, he would give his dogs food and meat powder.
Meat powder?
And then, I'm
sorry, that's why? But it's like cruel. No, he also was a sadist. You should probably...
So he did that, and then he took away the food, the meat powder, and found that the dogs would salivate at just the sound of the bell with no food present. So he discovered that if you pair two things, your brain is going to associate those things with each other. So when you have one, you are going to, expect the other or have a response to the other. Mm-hmm. And, you can see this in popular media a lot. If you are an Office fan, the show The Office, so good.
That show.
Jim, one of the characters on there, every time he starts up his computer, he gives his friend Dwight an Altoid. And so he got to the point where he would just start up his computer and then his friend would reach out a hand for an Altoid and he was like, "What are you doing?" And he didn't even realize. So this is pretty common. So the idea is that you might have a fetish because whatever this is, it was paired with a sexual experience that was maybe gratifying for you in some way. So, for example, let's say, as a teenager, you always wore white socks for some reason. Maybe your mom only ever bought you white socks and you always wore them. And so you only masturbated in white socks. And now as an adult, why do I have this need?
There's just something about those white socks.
There's something about them.
I gotta have them on. Mm-hmm.
Your brain has paired the two. Mm-hmm. We can't do that many studies with humans around this because of ethics, right? But they have done studies on rats, and they found that, the rats that had sexual experiences wearing jackets. I
was just gonna ask, what's the rat fetish happening out there? These poor rats. Oh my goodness.
I know. I think they're having a great time though, because they're just
They were
like,
like, "Will you just mate with each other with a jacket on? We want to see."
Yeah. Right. If they like started with jackets, they could only achieve sexual gratification with jackets on. You know, if they didn't start with jackets and they put jackets on, they could still achieve it.
Wow.
It's just because that was initially paired, they couldn't achieve it without that. They had a fetish for that jacket.
You know, it's so really the idea is that earlier on in developing sexuality and sexual behaviors, there would be some other variable that would be connected with that, associated with that sexual arousal that then becomes kind of tied to it. And could it be an experience or like a sense? I'm thinking about like teenagers who are like sneaking around. Let's say you only ever had sex in a car as a teenager. What are you raising your eyebrows at me for?
I'm just seeing where you're going with
Hypothetically speaking, Victoria, if you only ever had sex in a car as a teenager, could that become fetishized? Like, could that become like, well, I'm just like really horny whenever I'm in a car with my partner, or like I really only prefer like a strong preference to. I mean, that sounds like that would be more of a kink, because unless you could only ever feel aroused in a car, that would be a fetish. If you
would be a fetish, or if you were fantasizing about being in the car.
Oh, or you're just like visualizing it, thinking about it, and you're still able to.
Right.
Okay, so that would make it a fetish. If it was something that you just enjoy and like, but you don't have to have it, it would be a kink.
Right.
And let's go one step further here. You would have a fetishistic disorder if you were getting arrested regularly having sex in a car, or your partner really didn't want to have sex in a car and you really did, and you were like arguing about it, or you were just like so upset at the fact that like, why can't I just have sex in a bed? Why does it always have to be a car? Then that would be what would probably meet criteria for a fetishistic disorder.
For sure. And you know, sometimes just like a little trigger warning here for this next kind of minute or so, sometimes this can happen as a result of a sexual experience that wasn't pleasurable for some reason. This association can happen and then you just need it. There's been stories of people that like had gotten spanked as a kid and they had a response of like an erection. Because, you know, sometimes your body just like has responses and it's okay, right? Like a lot of times growing up, a lot of penis owners will describe just random situations that they get an erection and there's no like cause to that. And so there's been stories of like getting spanked and having an erection, and then something about that experience got fetishized, like feeling the person's tights who was spanking them, that kind of thing. And then the tights have now become fetishized and they need tights to experience sexual gratification. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a positive experience that's paired that creates a fetish. It can unfortunately be a negative one too, as well.
I gotta wonder if there's a factor that would play a part in someone fetishizing something that would be unpleasant or negative, if there is also a tendency to suppress sexuality or feel shame around sexuality, because I think an element of shame can be associated with sex as well.
Very true.
And if that kind of all bleeds together, that like, oh, now I feel aroused when I'm being shamed in some way. I don't know. It's a theory. If that's part of like what would then also maybe play a part in the masochistic tendencies.
That's a good theory too. You know, the kink community can complain that there's too much association with trauma, assuming that everyone with a kink has trauma. And a doctor of psychology, I don't remember who it was, I can always gain that information if anyone's interested, was saying it's definitely less than 30% of people in the kink community with a kink have trauma. Like it's not the majority of the community from what he's found. But sometimes people people will have a trauma, and then they'll engage in activities that make them feel powerful again, empowered in a similar kind of scenario, kind of right that trauma. So that could be part of it too, potentially.
There was a really interesting podcast episode on Modern Love, I think it was. If anyone listens to Modern Love Podcast, I wish I could find, or I wish I knew off the top of my head which one it was. But that's a podcast where they read New York Times essays, and often they'll have the author on and read the essay. So these really beautifully written pieces, and then they will also interview the author about some more of the backstory behind this piece. And there was a woman who shared about her experience entering the BDSM world and what she learned from that experience and what it taught her about herself and her relationships. And I thought it was really fascinating. I wonder if I can send a message to anybody who is listening right now and they would see it in the chat, right?
Yeah.
If I can find it.
Although I don't think that the chat stays there after it. So it's just be whoever is watching it now.
Or I could just try to find the title of it. It really is good. I mean, whether you're interested in BDSM or not, it was... Let me see if I do modern...
I mean, there's lots of good podcasts out there too, like Sex and Psychology and...
we should have a whole episode on just like our favorite resources, books, podcasts,
I know,
websites.
One thing too I want to clarify about fetishes is that they're not just touch. Like, it's not just from touching feet or touching tights or whatever it is. It can be any sense. It could be the smell of something, the feel of something,
sensory,
taste of something. It's all sensory. Yeah. And
I think your sense of smell is a really strong one. Okay, 100%. Yeah, this is it. It's Modern Love. Dominate Me, but not like that is the name of the episode of Modern Love.
That sounds good.
It is. It's really good. Okay.
So yeah, so anything can be paired. And there's evidence that things can be paired just once. When we think of Pavlov's dogs, Pavlov, are furries a fetish? Good question, Mr. Johnny Two Shoes. Are furries a fetish? I'm not sure, because I'm not quite sure too much about furries. I understand that furries are sometimes people dressing up as characters, different like
animals,
furry
right?
characters.
Aren't they usually animals?
If they're needing that to achieve sexual gratification, if they're needing to wear that, or if they're needing their partner to wear that, or they're needing to fantasize about it, absolutely, that could be a fetish.
Yeah. If it's a requirement, right? A requirement for arousal, thinking about it or acting it out. Otherwise, it could just be a fun kink. I would think that would fall under the kink category.
If not absolutely necessary, for sure. That's a great question.
Thank you, Mr. Johnny Two Shoes. Do you enjoy being a furry yourself, or is it just a curious question you're curious about?
Yeah. We're happy to answer any questions about this, for sure. But yes.
I'm like, tell us more, Mr. Johnny Two Shoes. I will say, it takes courage to ask a question, especially of a sexual nature, on the internet. So,
for sure.
Kudos to you. No, just the thought of it when you were talking. Fair enough. I feel like that's probably a common one people think about too, right?
For sure. So, as I was saying, people think with Pavlov, because Pavlov had to repeat it over and over again, that conditioning can only happen when it's a repeated thing. That's not necessarily true. They found that it can happen once. Like, if you have a significant orgasm, like your first orgasm, and it's paired with something, immediately you can be conditioned. It doesn't have to happen repeatedly.
Do people develop a fetish around a sex toy?
Potentially. So that's actually one of the clarifications in our diagnostic manual, is that like a vibrator cannot be considered a fetish, which I think is interesting, because if you absolutely need it for sexual arousal or gratification, I think, why not?
That's really fun. Well,
is it just because it's not considered sexual to begin with? Like, I find that really interesting.
Well, if it's specifically for a sexual purpose, are they not, just like how they assume genitals exist for a sexual purpose, so don't sex toys, so they wouldn't meet the criteria if you're like, I always need my vibrator. Let's say you could only achieve orgasm via a vibrator. I could see why that would be like, it would be hard to kind of put that in the category of a fetish or a fetishistic disorder.
What if you're even only fantasizing about it? Like fantasizing about a vibrator, right? I feel like that could be considered a fetish.
I'm having a lot of inappropriate laughter tonight. Fantasizing about the vibrator but not using the vibrator. I guess. Well, because the vibrator, it's sensory, right? And less about the idea of something. But I don't know. Now we're stumping ourselves.
I think it should be. I don't know if that's true. I think
it should be.
You know, if you're for instance, if you're only fantasizing about it, like, and only achieve orgasm via fantasy, that kind of thing.
If you're in love with your vibrator and nothing else, and like that's it, that's all that it does for you. I'm thinking about the episode of Sex and the City, did you ever watch Sex and the City?
No.
Oh, Charlotte like discovers the rabbit like dildo vibrator and like doesn't leave her bedroom for like a week, and her friends have to like come and like convince her to leave. Anyway, it's a great show.
That's hilarious. Yeah. That's amazing. It's a good question. A good question. Another thought in terms of conditioning is like young people watching porn, right? Mm-hmm. Like we all have arousal templates. So like this map of what gets us aroused, right? And so if young people are watching a lot of porn, like there's a potential that they're associating like pleasure with something that's in the porn, and then that's creating a fetish for them later on potentially.
It sounds to me like there's still an element of mystery to,
absolutely,
right? Like how we develop a fetish or a kink, a unique fantasy, and that can be unique to each individual, maybe how that came to be. And there are people that I know I've worked with that never really find this like aha moment of like, this is why I have this particular fetish. And I find that really interesting that there's still kind of some mystery around it.
For sure. And we're not done yet. There's more.
Oh, there's more.
There's a lot more hypotheses here.
Oh, I want to hear them all. I love them all.
So another theory is sometimes, we talk a lot in our therapy, usually about like sometimes we need to engage in acceptance. Sometimes the more we fight against something, the harder it bites back. When we try to resist or suppress something, the harder it bites back. That's why we encourage people to be authentic and feel their feelings, right? So one idea is that, if people are fighting and suppressing so much, it's biting back harder to the point of obsession, right? Theory.
I mean, that seems to be a truth that exists in a lot of areas. Like when you think about anxieties, if people have phobias, the more they worry about it, the more they avoid something, the more they resist, the stronger and more intense and powerful that worry and anxiety becomes. So practicing some radical acceptance around anxiety and the things that you worry about, it would kind of make sense that could be applied to a fetish.
For sure. Another theory is of compensation. So if for some reason somebody doesn't have like an appropriate outlet or can't use a traditional outlet for their sexual gratification, they compensate with things that, are non-living or non-genital, and it just becomes habituated.
Like American Pie situation.
With the apple pie, is that what it was?
I don't know.
Is that what you're thinking of?
Yeah, right?
Yeah,
he was like,
okay,
I just want to like feel the feeling and replicate something close to it. So he puts his penis in a pie. I don't remember what kind of pie it was. If anyone in the chat remembers, feel free. I feel like an apple pie probably makes sense.
I feel like at some point we might want to unpack that.
What, the apple pie? Well, am I not getting the theory there that like, well, I don't.
I love that. I just think it's hilarious that you're like, it's an apple pie, because I'm thinking, do apples feel like vulvas?
I've never thought too hard about what fruit and fruit are. I mean, we have a peach, logo,
should have been peach pie.
It should have been an apple pie if
right.
A peach pie and apple pie. Sure. Anyway.
Another one, if we're thinking of theories, so there is a fetish slash kink, depending on how you want to look at it, of ADL, which is adult diaper lovers, and adults who can only achieve sexual satisfaction or gratification if they are wearing a diaper. And so part of the theory on that is that it's a means of control, in that they're like controlling humiliation is one of the theories. Like maybe in their upbringing they experience a lot of rejection and humiliation, and so they're at the point where they're compensating for that by controlling it now, and it's become fetishized.
And is that the theory of compensation only around the diaper fetish?
No, it was just the best way, I think, to explain
that. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's still perceived to be like a humiliating act. However, they're taking control of it by associating that with sexual arousal and participating in that behavior on their own accord.
Yeah. That's a theory.
Right. A theory.
Yeah. And if you subscribe to any of these fetishes and you agree or you disagree, we would love to hear from you. Like anonymously, we won't share like your email or your stream name. Like just reach out to us and we're happy to clarify or add more information in an upcoming stream for sure.
How can people be anonymous here? If you leave a suggestion in the suggestion box, I wonder if that's anonymous?
I don't know.
Or if that's a good, or like if you're listening to this on YouTube, can you comment anonymously? I don't know.
I don't know if that's an option. But again, like, we will not share your name if you don't want that to be shared. Absolutely. We're pretty good at respecting confidentiality when asked. That's one of our skills, fortunately.
Sort of a requirement of, at least when we're on the job as therapists, right?
Yes. So this next one I thought was kind of fascinating. This next theory, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but it's vestigial explanation, which is there's a theory that some fetishes, at least, are left over from evolution. So there are some fetishes for urine or feces. And so this is where that kind of applies. This theory is that some animals will like lick the private parts of their children, of their babies, to assist in expelling the urine and the feces to clean them, and it expels into their mouths. This sounds like a wild theory, but I think it's so interesting. Like they do that for hygiene and nutrition. Like,
okay, but yeah. So they're doing this we're talking about animals?
Animals have been found to do this for hygiene and nutrition. And so there's a theory that like the specific kind of fetish, maybe around urine and feces, is left over from evolution. Interesting theory, I think.
But how does that get connected with sexual arousal? Because if you're doing it for hygienic purposes and for cleaning your baby kitties and puppies, like,
I don't know.
Somehow
it's a wild theory.
Okay, there's a lot of flaws in this theory.
I didn't want to not share it as a theory just because I thought it was wild. I think it's interesting.
It is interesting. I feel like they have a little more explaining to do there. But
I know. Yeah, I don't know there, but I thought it was interesting for sure. Okay, and now this is the last one because I want to talk specifically about feet since this is the title. Because there's.
You were worried that we didn't have enough material tonight. Can I just say that we are really?
I know we got a lot. I didn't realize that we had this much material. I know there's a lot to talk about with fetishes and kinks and a lot to clarify. But any of the following theories, probably except for the last one that we just talked about, could cover the foot fetish, right? Like conditioning. You may have paired feet with some sort of, sexual arousal or gratification for some reason. Maybe, when you were watching porn a lot, they kept doing shots of the woman's feet or the man's feet, and you really liked that or whatever. And it got associated, and then here we are. That's just an example for conditioning. But also, so in our brain, there's a map a body map where we get sensory information from our body, right? It's like our brain's kind of like, oh, we're receiving sensory information from our hands. Someone's touching our hands, someone's touching our cheek, that kind of thing. And in our brain, on the body map, the feet are right next to the genitals.
Wow.
Yeah. And so there's some theory of like some neural crossover where something happens neurally where those two are associated.
Okay.
I think that's
really
fascinating.
That is so interesting. So that might be a reason why a foot fetish has become such a common term,
100%.
People automatically, when you think fetish, you think feet, right? A lot of people
100%.
think feet. And so that would kind of explain why that would be such a popular area of interest.
Exactly. And they've even done studies on individuals who have lost a foot, and literally those patients feel orgasms in their phantom foot.
Hang on. People that already had a foot fetish, you mean?
No foot fetish. Sorry.
How do they find these people? They're like, we need volunteers for people that have a foot fetish and have lost their foot.
Sorry, they did not already have a foot fetish. They were just exploring, I think, this connection in the brain. I'm not quite sure, but they found people with an amputated foot could feel orgasms in their phantom foot. I think that's so cool.
Well, and now it makes me wonder if we should all have an orgasm, not live, but like, you know, and see, like, I don't know, pay attention to your feet. Like, do you feel something in your feet?
I mean, we talk all the time in the media about toes curling, right? It's like so common for like feet to be associated in that way of like, oh, like, you know, she's not faking it if her toes are curling.
I actually have heard that, but I think, I wish I could, I do not know where this is coming in my brain, but that like what you see that is happening to, I know where it was. Oh, I'm going to have to follow up and find the passage. So in the book, She Comes First, they talk about it's basically a how-to guide for men in heterosexual relationships to learn how to perform cunnilingus on their female partner, which is oral sex on a vulva. And they talk about how to determine and identify if she is in fact having an orgasm or just signs. You're not gonna know for a fact, but but like, you know, telltale signs. They say like what you see in the media, which is like a woman arching her back, and I want to say they said and toes curling in are actually not what often happens for a woman who is having an orgasm. That actually they would be hunching. I mean, it doesn't sound very glamorous, like hunching forward. And your feet, I think, it's so sexy. And I think your feet actually flex out. Everyone's going to need to have an orgasm and think about their feet.
No, you're right.
Am I right? Your toes don't curl.
No, we think of them curling, but if you listen to Andrew Huberman, which is a neuroscientist, he's talked about fetishes a little bit, and he talks about them curling backwards.
Right.
Yeah.
So if your female partner says she's having an orgasm and her toes are curling in, I think you have the right to maybe be a little suspicious of that. But wow, I feel like I was just shouting a second ago. So
I think we just got really excited about toes into that and orgasms. I love it. And so you were right. This is a super common fetish on a very popular pornography website. I won't say it because I don't know what the rules are around that.
Apparently you can't say the word fetish, so we're already banned. We are already off of Twitch, effective.
We're out of here.
Now, yeah.
On that porn website over the last year of 2022, the most popular term searched around fetishes were feet, by far.
Hence why we have the word feet in our title, so that people will find us.
What else is interesting on that same website? Women have searched it in the last year 148% more.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait, has there been more men? like
more men have too, but only by, let me see here, 10%.
Women are really getting on board with the foot fetish, huh?
Yeah.
But like historically, has it been primarily more of a male fetish? I mean, I think stereotypically, we think men have more of a fetish with feet. You don't hear too many women talking about it. But if it is connected to just where your mapping is in your brain, it would make sense that could be a possibility for anybody.
For sure. And people have talked about too with like the foot fetish is like when you think of worshiping someone, right? Like kissing their feet, right? Some people might really like the idea of them being worshipped, and so they like need that stimulation on their feet to feel that like validation.
I wonder if there's a cultural piece to that.
Maybe, right? Yeah. Or if you like being submissive, like you maybe really enjoy providing that, kissing somebody else's feet, right? Like being that submissive partner might be part of it too. Not necessarily the feet, but like the symbolism of it, and then it gets connected, if that makes sense.
And we should probably talk about like, the being hygienic about it is probably something to be mindful of. I think it was the last book I read, The New Monogamy. She had listed a whole bunch of different sexual behaviors and kinks, and it was like a questionnaire that you could sit down and answer with your partner. And some of them that were listed on there were like licking shoes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not feet per se, but your shoes have been a lot of places. Your feet probably have been a lot of places.
Yeah.
Be careful about taking care of your health and your hygiene if you're engaging in these behaviors, that you're like, it's clean feet. If you're going to be putting your mouth on it anyway. If we're talking about putting shoes or feet into your mouth, I'm going to be mindful of. Yeah.
And shoes are also a really common fetish, I think, with that association with feet.
Okay.
Or like there's been a lot of association with like high heels, right? Being very, very sexy. And so that's like really common as well. Fishnets, high heels, tights.
I wonder if that's still, I feel like those were more of like a thing of the 80s and 90s. Like, are people
Good question.
fetishizing like black nylons, nowadays in the ways they used to? Or
it's Crocs now. Just Crocs.
People are fetishizing Birkenstocks and like.
Which if you are, we're not laughing at you if you are. We're not laughing at you, I promise.
Trends, whatever's trending now.
Exactly. We're laughing at the different trends about how like high heels used to be sexy and now Crocs are sexy.
Now your UGG slippers are, sexy.
Exactly. So off the top of your head, and it's okay if not, are there any other fetishes that come to mind for you that you've heard of to help like normalize some of the fetishes out there?
Well, some of the ones that have come to me in the work that I do often involve an element of there being a lot of shame or potential harm around, right? We're not usually seeing people that are really happy and feel great about their fetish. But I would say a diaper fetish is one that I have seen, as well as, I don't know, the term is ball busting, but it would involve inflicting pain on the testicles.
So that I learned recently is actually called CBT, which is hilarious because in our field that's cognitive behavioral therapy. So
CBT?
when we hear CBT,
oh wow,
it's cock and ball torture.
Cognitive ball torture?
No, cock and ball.
Oh. I can't. I am not bringing my best self to this live stream tonight.
I think it's my lack of a voice to enunciate for you. You're like, I don't know what you're saying.
Well, because the term cognitive is like thinking, your thought process, right? So I'm like, a cognitive ball torture. Wow, where is that connection happening? Okay, cock and ball torture. Got it.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So I would say those are, sometimes it's what people are viewing in pornography that they find distressing, which I don't know that that's necessarily a fetish, but those are themes And usually people will describe a feeling of like an addictive quality to addictive cycle to some of these behaviors. They feel like a compulsion to engage in these behaviors in spite of whatever harm or distress it's causing in their life. So that's what I have, what comes, to the forefront of my mind. How about for you?
Well, I'm thinking in terms of the porn too, of what you were just saying. I think if they're viewing the porn and they're needing a non-living object in there,
we have
a commenter saying, "I'm never going to think of CBT the same." I'm glad we could,
Mary
add some more.
Mary, thank you for your comment. You're a first-time chatter. Welcome.
Yes. If they're needing that, if they're needing a non-living object in the porn, or if they're really focused on something that's non-genital, like a navel is a common fetish, a belly button, or a foot, or if they're focused on hair. Some people have fetishes for it's common for pubic hair. So
okay, like you have to have the pubic hair like on themselves, or others, or both.
Both. Yeah. So if they're needing that for sexual gratification or arousal, that could definitely be a fetish, because that's fantasy, right? Needing that, fantasizing about it in order to achieve.
And the belly button one, like, is that you need to look at the belly button, you need to be touching the belly button, anything related to belly button.
Yep.
Yes.
Anything.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry.
Earth to Victoria. Oh my gosh. Do you want to? I don't know how much more you had there, Victoria. I know we had like a couple of Reddit posts. Did you want to address one of those quickly, or
any other questions you have about anything we talked about?
No.
Any fetish questions?
No. I think it's all
right.
Good material here. Okay.
Yeah, let's answer a Reddit question. Let's try to help somebody out.
Yeah. Oh, of course, it's going to take me like 5 minutes to find it. Okay. How can I, a 22-year-old male, confess my fetish to my girlfriend, 22-year-old female? Hi, all. I have a fetish for white socks. Oh, do we want to do this one? Yeah?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. So we talked about this. A white socks fetish. Okay.
Yeah.
My girlfriend and I have been dating for more than 3 years. We love each other and are ready to build a long-term serious relationship. I want to be completely frank with her and have no secrets. For this, I need to confess my fetish to her. During sex, I hinted a couple of times that she should wear white socks, and she reacted normally. But I'm afraid that if I admit that this is a very strong trigger for me, and that I would even like her to wear white socks more often in everyday life, then she will not understand me or even begin to feel disgusted. I understand that the longer I keep this a secret, the worse it gets. Because if I admit it when we are married or have children, it will be much worse. Thanks in advance, everyone, for the advice. Okay.
I think with everything that we were talking about with shame with fetishes, it makes sense for someone to question like how they bring up a fetish to a partner, automatically assuming it's not going to be well received, right? Feeling like they're different is not going to be well received.
It makes sense that you would be, have anxiety expressing this, especially if it's something that is seen as like, I think maybe what can happen with a fetish, we're talking about feet fetish. We were just talking about how it's so common, and that you might be met with a lot more acceptance around that. White socks being a bit more unique, less common, less heard about. So the shame that sometimes people can feel with that happens because you feel like you're the only one, or you're alone in it, or no one would get it or understand you, or you'd be rejected, or because of that. So it's totally valid that this person is worried about sharing this, but also I love the place that this is coming from. He wants to have no secrets. He wants to be honest. He sees himself potentially marrying this girl and, having kids and a future together. And if this is a pretty significant part of what is arousing to this guy, I think it would make sense to share that with her.
I agree 100%. I think if you can, I absolutely believe in authenticity, right? Like if this is not, again, like harmful, right? And this is not something you need to work on in therapy because it's a disorder, like you absolutely should talk about it with your partner, even though it's scary.
You broke up for a second there for me, Victoria. You were just saying even though it's scary to talk about it.
Yeah, even though it's scary.
Yeah. I feel like you could kind of, if you approach it as this big, scary, I need to tell you something, and you approach it like she's going to leave you, then that's going to like send that kind of energy into the conversation. So instead, just first accepting yourself, that this is something that is arousing to you and that you enjoy and would like to incorporate into your sex life. It sounds like you would like her to wear white socks all the time. That might be a different, like a different conversation, or maybe you need to like think about some negotiation there, some boundaries there. Yeah. She might not want to wear white socks all the time.
For sure. And I think just like you said, like going into it casual, but also like not looking for any answers right there and then. Just be like, are you open to it? Can you think about it? You just think about it, and then you guys have a conversation later, because you don't want them to be on guard, like, oh my God, how do I respond to this? You know, like let them think about it, come back, have a conversation too.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like when you have asked her, just looking back at what was written here, I hinted a couple of times that she should wear white socks, and she reacted normally. I don't know what that means, but I don't know if that means she put white socks on and didn't really think anything more about it. That could be a good sign that it's not like she was horrified at the suggestion of wearing white socks. Right. So being able to say, hey, you know how like I've kind of asked a couple of times if you would wear white socks? I want to share that, like, I actually find that such a turn on, like more than I've let on anytime you're wearing white socks. So it would mean a lot if we had more white socks in the bedroom, and kind of just keep it fun. I think anytime we talk about sex, the more you can keep it light, fun, positive, keeping it sexy, you're likely going to get just a more engaging response, even if you don't get the answer you're hoping for, versus if you approach it from a place of, I'm so scared and worried and feel so much shame and I'm about to drop a bomb on you, or I'm going to tell you what, or if you approach it with, you know what, you haven't been wearing white socks and that's a problem for me, right? Versus I would love it. Critical. I love it when you wear white socks, and I would love it if you would wear more white socks.
I love that.
Keeping it as like a positive and what you would like more of. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Not, challenging any sort of criticism. And, going through Reddit posts just to like hopefully add some reassurance to people out there. A lot of times with Reddit questions, people will post updates, and so many of the updates I was seeing was like, it was no big deal. Like my partner was receptive.
Yeah, and this person, I didn't read it, but this person did have an update, right?
Maybe, I don't remember.
Oh, no. Now I'm going to take 5 minutes to find it.
But that's okay. There was another one I read with a woman who had a sneezing fetish, and her husband was really receptive.
Wait, a sneezing fetish?
Yeah.
How does that happen? Like, you're going to make yourself sneeze?
Like,
Or
very,
pretend
very
to sneeze. Like, I'm like, achoo! Like,
I don't know. I don't know the details.
Why didn't you learn more, Victoria? I need to know.
But her husband was super receptive, and she was really worried about that.
Wow. Okay, this person does have an update in case you are all eagerly at the edge of your seats. Thanks, everyone, for the advice. You all gave me more confidence. I've talked with her about it. She said that she had noticed this in me a couple of times and that it does not bother her, but rather gives her interest and novelty. She said that she now knows the attribute for future surprises. Thanks again, everyone. Oh my gosh, marry her.
Marry her.
Get married.
Yeah, exactly. But hopefully that provides reassurance to people out there that are struggling with this.
So, do we have a question that we can leave with our viewers that they can leave in the suggestion box or comment on YouTube around fetishes?
So maybe so it's not so vulnerable. Like, did you learn anything new about fetishes today?
Yeah, any of this information, you know, apply to yourself or someone you know, or you just find something really interesting. We would love to hear your thoughts about information covered.
Yeah. And we're always wanting to get more and more educated. So if you have anything to add, shoot us a message.
Great. Thanks, Victoria.
Thank you, Holly.
Okay, we will be back next Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, just in time to send you all off into our Thanksgiving holiday here in the U.S. with more thoughts about sex and fetishes and kinks. And don't ban us, Twitch.
Don't ban us.
We come in peace. I promise.
We come in peace.
All right, everybody have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.